The global entertainment world is once again turning its attention to Taylor Swift, not because of a new music release or a record-breaking concert tour, but due to a major philanthropic move that quietly made a powerful impact. The international pop superstar is reported to have made a substantial donation to a non-profit organization founded by country music star Brad Paisley, a gesture that has resonated far beyond the charity itself and drawn admiration from high-profile figures, including NFL star Travis Kelce. According to sources close to the organization, Taylor Swift's donation was made privately, without public announcements or media coordination. The nonprofit, long recognized for its work in fighting food insecurity and supporting underserved communities across rural America, reportedly received a financial contribution large enough to significantly expand its operations. While the exact amount has not been disclosed, insiders describe it as transformational for the organization's ongoing and future programs. Brad Paisley later confirmed the donation, expressing deep gratitude and emphasizing that Swift never requested recognition or publicity. In his statement, Paisley described her support as genuine and deeply personal, noting that the contribution came with no conditions attached. He highlighted that the funds would immediately help extend food access programs and strengthen community outreach efforts that had previously been limited by resources. The revelation quickly gained traction across social media and entertainment news outlets, with many observers praising Swift's continued commitment to philanthropy. Cultural analysts noted that the timing of the donation stood out, particularly as public scrutiny around celebrity wealth and social responsibility continues to intensify. In that context, Swift's quiet approach was widely seen as a contrast to more performative acts of charity. Public interest grew even stronger when reports surfaced that Travis Kelce had reacted with genuine admiration to the news. The NFL tight end, who has been frequently linked to Swift in recent months, was described by sources as being deeply impressed by her decision to prioritize impact over attention. Those close to Kelce indicated that he viewed the donation as a reflection of Swift's character rather than a public relations move. This reaction added another layer to the story, shifting it from a single act of generosity into a broader conversation about influence, values, and leadership among public figures. Media commentators suggested that Kelce's response helped amplify the emotional weight of the story, highlighting how meaningful actions can inspire respect even within elite circles of sports and entertainment. As coverage continued to unfold, tangible results from the donation began to emerge. The nonprofit reportedly expanded its food distribution network, increased volunteer recruitment, and secured additional interest from new donors. What began as a private contribution quickly became a catalyst, triggering a ripple effect that strengthened the organization's ability to serve vulnerable communities. Perhaps the most striking detail revealed was Swift's reported request that public focus remain on the people receiving assistance, rather than on herself. That message, shared internally within the organization, resonated strongly with supporters and observers alike. Many viewed it as the defining moment of the story, reinforcing the authenticity of her involvement and the intention behind the donation. Fans responded with overwhelming support, flooding social media with messages praising Swift's empathy and sense of responsibility. The phrase Taylor Swift effect began trending again, this time not in relation to music or ticket sales, but in connection with measurable social impact. Brad Paisley's nonprofit saw a surge in visibility, while Travis Kelce's admiration further fueled public discussion. As of now, the full details of the donation remain private. However, its influence is undeniable. In an era saturated with celebrity headlines, this story stands out as a reminder that some of the most powerful actions happen away from the spotlight. Taylor Swift's decision to give quietly has not only changed the trajectory of a nonprofit organization, but has also reshaped the conversation around what meaningful influence truly looks like in the modern celebrity landscape. Behind the scenes, sources familiar with the nonprofit's operations revealed that the donation arrived at a critical moment. Rising food costs, supply chain challenges, and increasing demand from struggling families had placed significant pressure on the organization's resources. Staff members reportedly described the situation as unsustainable just weeks before the contribution came in. The sudden financial support not only stabilized ongoing programs, but also prevented the cancellation of several planned outreach initiatives. Insiders noted that the donation allowed the nonprofit to secure long-term food supplier agreements, ensuring consistent access to essential goods rather than short-term relief. This shift, according to experts in charitable management, is often the difference between temporary assistance and lasting community impact. In this case, Taylor Swift's contribution reportedly helped move the organization from survival mode into strategic growth. Industry observers have also pointed out that this act aligns with a broader pattern in Swift's career. Over the years, she has quietly supported disaster relief efforts, education programs, and individual community initiatives, often without public acknowledgement. What makes this situation different, analysts say, is the scale of the impact and the timing, coming amid heightened public discourse around wealth inequality and corporate responsibility. Media attention intensified as entertainment outlets began revisiting past interviews and statements from Swift, highlighting her long-standing belief that success carries an obligation to give back. While she has rarely spoken in detail about her philanthropic philosophy, those close to her suggest she views giving as a private responsibility rather than a branding opportunity. This perspective has contributed to the authenticity many fans and commentators now associate with her actions. The involvement of Brad Paisley further strengthened the credibility of the story. Known for his consistent advocacy and hands-on approach to community support, Paisley has spent years building trust within the nonprofit sector. His confirmation of the donation, combined with his refusal to disclose exact figures, reinforced the perception that the focus should remain on outcomes rather than headlines. Meanwhile, Travis Kelce's reported reaction continued to generate discussion across sports and entertainment media. Analysts noted that his admiration resonated with audiences because it reflected a shift in how influence is perceived. Rather than celebrating fame or financial success alone, the narrative centered on values, empathy, and the responsible use of power. This framing, experts say, is increasingly important to younger audiences who expect public figures to demonstrate social awareness. As the story evolved, attention turned to the communities benefiting directly from the expanded programs. Local reports described increased access to fresh food, improved distribution efficiency, and a noticeable rise in volunteer engagement. Community leaders credited the renewed momentum to the stability provided by the donation, noting that consistent funding allowed them to plan months ahead rather than operate week to week. Economists and social impact analysts weighed in as well, suggesting that high-profile yet low-key contributions like this can influence broader giving trends. When major figures choose discretion over spectacle, it can encourage other donors to focus on effectiveness rather than recognition. In this sense, the ripple effect of Swift's decision may extend beyond a single organization. Public reaction continued to build as fans shared stories of how charitable programs had affected their own communities. Social media platforms were filled with discussions not only about Swift, but also about the nonprofit's mission and ways to contribute. Donation links circulated widely, and volunteer signups reportedly increased in the days following the news coverage. Despite the growing attention, Taylor Swift has not issued a personal statement regarding the donation. Representatives close to her indicated that this silence was intentional, consistent with her desire to keep the focus on the work being done rather than on herself. This restraint has only intensified public interest, with many interpreting it as further evidence of sincerity. As coverage reached its peak, commentators began framing the story as a defining moment in modern celebrity philanthropy. Rather than a publicity-driven announcement, the narrative unfolded organically, driven by results and reactions rather than press releases. The combination of Brad Paisley's credibility, Travis Kelce's admiration, and tangible community outcomes created a compelling arc that extended far beyond entertainment news. In the broader cultural context, the story has become a case study in how influence can be exercised responsibly. It highlights the potential for collaboration between artists, athletes, and community leaders, demonstrating that meaningful change often begins with quiet decisions rather than grand gestures. While the exact figures remain undisclosed and likely will remain so, the impact is already measurable. Expanded services, increased community engagement, and heightened awareness of food insecurity have all been linked to the donation's aftermath. For many observers, these outcomes represent the true measure of success. As the news cycle continues to move forward, This story stands as a reminder that not all major moments arrive with fanfare. Sometimes, the most powerful developments unfold quietly, revealing their significance only through the changes they create. In this case, Taylor Swift's decision to give without seeking attention has left a lasting imprint on a nonprofit organization, on the communities it serves, and on the ongoing conversation about what genuine leadership looks like in the public eye. As the story continued to unfold, media analysts began examining why this particular act of generosity resonated so strongly with the public. In an era dominated by fast headlines and fleeting viral moments, the quiet nature of the donation stood out. There was no immediate press release, no carefully staged photo opportunity, and no accompanying brand partnership. Instead, the news surfaced organically through the nonprofit's internal circles, lending it a sense of credibility that is increasingly rare in celebrity coverage. Several nonprofit experts noted that Brad Paisley's organization had long struggled with visibility despite its consistent impact. While respected within charitable networks, it lacked the global reach enjoyed by mainstream foundations. Taylor Swift's involvement, even without public acknowledgement, effectively bridged that gap. Once the connection became known, the nonprofit experienced a surge in attention that money alone could not buy, yet it came without compromising its mission or values. Entertainment journalists also highlighted how the story subtly reframed Taylor Swift's public narrative. Long recognized for her dominance in music, business acumen, and cultural influence, this episode added another layer to her legacy. Rather than reinforcing her status as a superstar, it emphasized her role as a stakeholder in real-world issues. For many readers, that shift made the story feel less like celebrity news and more like a meaningful social development. The timing continued to fuel speculation and discussion. With economic uncertainty affecting millions of households, food insecurity has become a growing concern across the United States. Reports indicated that demand for assistance from Brad Paisley's nonprofit had increased sharply in recent months. Against that backdrop, the donation was widely interpreted as both timely and necessary, addressing an urgent need rather than a symbolic cause. Observers within the music industry quietly acknowledged that such contributions can also influence peers. While no direct statements were made, sources suggested that several artists had reached out privately to the nonprofit after learning of the donation. This behind-the-scenes response reinforced the idea that impactful actions, even when unpublicized, can inspire similar behavior across influential circles. Travis Kelce's name continued to surface in follow-up coverage, particularly within sports media. Commentators pointed out that athletes increasingly face the same expectations as entertainers when it comes to social responsibility. Kelce's reported admiration for Swift's approach was interpreted as an endorsement of values over visibility. Analysts suggested that this reaction resonated with fans because it reflected a broader cultural shift toward authenticity. Sports analysts went further, noting that Kelce himself has been involved in charitable efforts throughout his career. His response to Swift's donation was therefore seen not as passive praise, but as recognition from someone familiar with the realities of philanthropy. That context added weight to his reported reaction and helped solidify the story's credibility across different audiences. As the days passed, local outlets covering the nonprofit service areas began publishing first-hand accounts from beneficiaries. Families described improved access to food supplies, shorter wait times, and a sense of stability that had been missing before. Community leaders emphasized that consistent funding, rather than one-time relief, was the key difference. These accounts shifted the focus of the narrative away from celebrity names and toward tangible outcomes. Policy experts and social commentators also entered the conversation, using the story as an example of how private contributions can complement public efforts. While acknowledging that philanthropy cannot replace systemic solutions, they argued that targeted donations can provide immediate relief and buy time for longer-term change. In this case, the donation was credited with preventing service disruptions during a critical period. Despite the growing attention, representatives for Taylor Swift maintained a low profile. No interviews were granted, and no clarifications were issued beyond confirming her general support for charitable causes. This consistent silence reinforced the perception that the donation was never intended as a public statement, even as it became one through circumstance. From a media perspective, the story evolved into a rare instance where follow-up coverage remained overwhelmingly positive. There were few skeptical takes and minimal backlash, a contrast to the typical cycle of celebrity philanthropy stories. Analysts attributed this to the combination of discretion, credible partners, and visible impact. As weeks passed, the nonprofit reported sustained increases in volunteer participation and recurring donations from new supporters. Organizers credited the momentum to heightened awareness rather than temporary hype. This ongoing engagement suggested that the story's influence extended beyond its initial news value. In broader cultural discussions, the donation was increasingly cited as an example of influence used responsibly. Panels, podcasts, and opinion columns referenced the case when discussing the role of wealth in society. While Taylor Swift herself remained absent from these conversations, her actions became a touchstone for debate about what meaningful contribution looks like in the modern era. Looking ahead, sources close to Brad Paisley's organization indicated that long-term planning was now possible in ways it had not been before. Expansion into additional regions, partnerships with local farmers, and educational initiatives around food security were reportedly under consideration. These developments underscored how a single decision can alter an organization's trajectory. As the news cycle gradually shifted to other topics, the story did not disappear, it settled. Rather than fading, it became part of a larger narrative about accountability, empathy, and leadership. For many observers, that endurance was the clearest sign of its significance. In the end, what began as a quiet act of generosity grew into a powerful example of impact without spectacle. Taylor Swift's donation to Brad Paisley's nonprofit, and Travis Kelce's genuine admiration for it, formed a narrative that transcended entertainment news. It became a story about priorities, about choosing substance over attention, and about how lasting change often starts far from the spotlight, only revealing itself through the lives it touches. As analysts continued to dissect the broader implications, many pointed out that stories like this rarely sustain momentum unless they tap into something deeper. In this case, the combination of trust, timing, and tangible results created a narrative that refused to fade quickly. Unlike typical celebrity charity headlines that spike and vanish within hours, this one lingered, evolving with each new detail that emerged from the nonprofit's expanding work. Insiders within the nonprofit sector emphasized that discretion played a crucial role. When donors allow organizations to operate without public pressure or branding demands, it often leads to more efficient use of resources. Brad Paisley's nonprofit reportedly benefited from exactly that freedom. Program directors were able to allocate funds where the need was most urgent, rather than where visibility would be highest. This flexibility, they said, translated directly into better outcomes on the ground. Journalists covering social impact stories began drawing comparisons to other high-profile philanthropic efforts, noting how rare it is for a global superstar to resist framing generosity as part of a larger narrative about themselves. In Taylor Swift's case, the absence of self-promotion became the story. Commentators argued that this restraint amplified the message far more than any public statement could have. Within the music industry, the donation quietly shifted conversations as well. Executives and artists alike acknowledged that public expectations are changing. Fans are increasingly attentive to how success is used, not just how it is achieved. While Swift has long been admired for her artistic control and business strategy, this episode reinforced the idea that influence carries moral weight. Several industry veterans suggested that such actions could redefine what legacy means for artists at the highest level. The ripple effects extended into fan communities. Online forums and fan-led initiatives began organizing independent fundraising drives inspired by the news. Moderators of large fan groups reported an uptick in discussions about food insecurity and local volunteering opportunities. In this way, the story moved beyond admiration and into participation, translating awareness into action. Sports media continued to revisit Travis Kelce's reaction, framing it as emblematic of a broader shift among elite athletes. With growing scrutiny on athlete activism and philanthropy, Kelce's admiration was interpreted as recognition of a model worth following. Analysts noted that athletes, much like musicians, now operate on global stages where their values are as visible as their performances. Former players and commentators added that genuine respect between public figures often resonates more than scripted endorsements. Kelce's reported response, described as unprompted and private, carried an authenticity that audiences could sense. This authenticity helped bridge two massive fan bases, music and sports, around a shared narrative of empathy and responsibility. Meanwhile, local governments and community organizations began referencing the nonprofit's expansion as a positive example of public-private collaboration. While the donation itself was private, its effects supported public infrastructure by easing pressure on social services. Officials acknowledged that consistent food access can have downstream benefits, from improved health outcomes to greater community stability. Academic researchers studying philanthropy also took note. Some cited the case in discussions about impact-driven giving, where donors prioritize measurable outcomes over recognition. In lectures and articles, the story was used to illustrate how quiet contributions can sometimes yield louder results, especially when paired with credible leadership and established community trust. As months progressed, the nonprofit released updated impact reports showing sustained growth. Distribution numbers increased, partnerships expanded, and operational efficiency improved. While the reports did not name individual donors, many observers connected the progress to the earlier infusion of support. The data provided concrete evidence that the initial headlines were not hollow. Despite the measurable success, Taylor Swift remained notably absent from follow-up narratives. There were no award acceptances, no acceptance speeches, and no appearances tied to the donation. This absence became symbolic, reinforcing the idea that the action itself was complete without validation. Cultural critics began framing the story as a counterpoint to performative activism. In opinion pieces, they argued that real influence is often quiet, unbranded, and uncomfortable to commodify. Swift's approach, they suggested, challenged both fans and peers to rethink what meaningful engagement looks like in a media-saturated world. Brad Paisley, when asked in later interviews about the long-term vision of his nonprofit, consistently redirected attention to the mission rather than the moment. He emphasized sustainability, community partnerships, and dignity for those receiving assistance. His messaging aligned closely with the values implied by the donation, reinforcing the cohesion of the narrative. By this stage, the story had transcended its origins. What began as entertainment news became a reference point in discussions about leadership, wealth, and responsibility. The involvement of figures like Swift and Kelce ensured visibility, but it was the absence of spectacle that gave the story its staying power. In retrospect, many analysts agreed that the most remarkable aspect was not the size of the donation, but the way it reshaped outcomes without reshaping identities. Taylor Swift did not reposition herself publicly. Travis Kelce did not capitalize on the moment. Brad Paisley did not turn the nonprofit into a headline machine. Each stayed within their role, allowing the impact to speak for itself. As the cultural conversation moved forward, the story remained quietly influential, resurfacing whenever discussions turned to authentic philanthropy. It served as a reminder that in a world driven by attention, restraint can be powerful, and that real change often arrives without announcement. Ultimately, the donation's legacy may be defined less by numbers and more by precedent. It demonstrated that high-profile influence does not require constant visibility, that admiration can stem from values rather than spectacle, and that newsworthy moments can still be grounded in substance. In an industry where headlines are often fleeting, this story endured because it offered something rare: a clear line between intention and outcome. And long after the initial coverage fades, the communities benefiting from that quiet decision will continue to feel its effects, an enduring testament to impact over image.